My wife's memorial wasn't the place for jokes, but my nephew didn't care. He smirked, clapped me on the back, and asked if I'd brought my cosplay medals to impress the guests. I didn't argue, didn't explain. I just reached for the small wooden box my wife protected her entire life, and when I placed it in his hands, his smile died instantly. Before I show you the moment everything changed, tell me where you're watching from and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Let's begin. Let me tell you about the day I buried my wife. The church hall felt too bright. Soft yellow bulbs hummed overhead, casting warm light that tried to make grief look prettier than it was. Folding chairs lined up in crooked rows. You could hear the quiet murmur of small talk, those nervous little laughs people make when they don't know what else to do. They were here for Margaret, my girl, my partner for nearly 50 years. She'd fought longer than most people knew, longer than she ever admitted. That was who she was, steady, stubborn, gentle in all the ways I wasn't. And now they were all here to honor her. Friends, cousins, old neighbors, people from her choir group, everyone coming up to me with soft voices, saying the usual things. She was lovely. She loved you so much. She's in a better place now. I nodded. I thanked them. I kept my hands folded loosely over the small wooden box resting on my lap. The same box Margaret kept hidden in her dresser drawer for decades. She'd polish it every spring like clockwork. Said it carried the part of our life that made everything else possible. I never opened it without her. Not once. Today was the first time it felt heavier than it looked. My sister's voice cut through the hall as she tried to organize the slideshow projector. She meant well, but moved like a woman herding ghosts. Her sons hovered around her, trying to help, mostly getting in the way. And then there was my nephew, Brent. 24 years old, smug little face always half-lit by whatever screen he was glued to, always convinced he knew more about life because he'd watched a documentary once. The kind of young man who thought sarcasm counted as personality. He'd been needling me for years, little comments, jokes, stuff he thought was harmless. It never bothered me much, until recently when his jokes became bolder, sharper, always circling back to the same point. He didn't believe I ever saw real service, thought my uniform photos were cosplay, thought my medals were freebies the Army hands out like candy, thought my limp came from old age, not combat. I've met worse men than him, men who meant what they said. Brent? He just liked the sound of his own laughter. But not today, not here, not at Margaret's memorial. I felt the shift before I saw him, heard the snickering first, young men pretending to be subtle. I lifted my eyes, and there he was, walking toward me with two friends in tow, each holding those cheap gas station iced coffees like they were cocktails at a gala. "Hey, Uncle Sam," Brent said, wearing that grin he must have practiced in the mirror. "Did you bring your cosplay medals today? Thought you might want to show off for the guests." His friends snorted. One elbowed the other, whispering something I didn't catch. I didn't react, didn't stiffen, didn't flinch. I just looked at him, straight in the eyes, steady. He shifted under it, just a flicker. But he felt something. Then he gave me a little shrug as if to say, "Relax, old man. It's just a joke." And the three of them wandered off toward the snack table, chuckling as they went. I let out a slow breath through my nose and kept my hand on the wooden box. It wasn't anger I felt, not even close. Something quieter, something deeper, a kind of hollow ache that settles right behind the ribs, because if anyone should have known better, it was Brent. He grew up around us. He knew who Margaret was. He knew how she treated that box like a treasure chest of our life together. And yet here he was, making a show out of disrespect on the one day I needed quiet. I looked around the room, faces that pretended not to notice. Some looked uncomfortable. Some pretended to be too busy refilling their cups. A memorial gathering doesn't leave much room for confrontation. No one wants to make a scene, least of all me. I rubbed my thumb over the smooth lid of the box. Margaret loved this thing, held it during storms, held it when the chemo made her hands shake. She'd whisper, "This is part of you, Sam, and part of us." Strange how something the size of a sandwich could feel like a heartbeat. I shifted in my chair, breathed steady, and stared ahead. Not at Brent, not at the crowd, not at the slideshow screen, just at the floor, just letting the weight of the day settle. And then, somewhere deep inside me, something tightened. A quiet click. A decision forming without fanfare. Today wasn't going to end the way Brent thought, not by a long shot. Grief does a strange thing to memory. When the room got too quiet around me, when voices faded into background hum, my mind drifted backward. Not to holidays or birthdays or the easy years. No. Straight to the night everything changed. Ramadi, 2004. The kind of heat that bends the horizon and cooks sand into glass. I was a combat medic with Bravo Company then, 40 pounds lighter, faster on my feet, too stubborn to die. We were running a night patrol along a stretch of road that was supposed to be clear. Supposed to be never meant much over there. The moon was thin as a fingernail. Dust hung in the air, thick enough to taste. I remember tightening the strap on my aid bag. I remember the rhythm of boots on dirt, the metallic whisper of rifles shifting, someone cracking a joke about the chow hall spaghetti. Just another night. Until it wasn't. The blast didn't sound like it does in the movies. No cinematic boom. It was a crack, sharp and wrong, like the earth itself just snapped in half. 1 second we were walking. The next, the world was fire. Our lead Humvee lifted clean off the ground. Flames blew out the windows like a dragon exhaling. Debris rained down, metal shards, dirt, parts I still don't like to think about. I hit the ground hard enough to rattle my spine. My ears rang so loud I thought I'd gone deaf. Then the screaming started. Real screaming. The kind that doesn't leave your head, even decades later. I pushed myself up, feeling something hot running down my side. Shrapnel. Small, sharp, fast. Didn't matter. My guys were burning alive. I crawled, then stumbled, then ran. The heat from the vehicle seared my face as I pulled the first soldier out. Private Larson, barely 19. His uniform half melted, his hands trembling, voice shaking. He kept saying, "Doc, I can't feel my leg." "You're okay," I lied. "Stay with me." I dragged him behind a concrete barrier, coughing from smoke, then turned back for the next. Rounds cracked somewhere off in the darkness. Return fire lit the sky like angry lightning. My vision blurred. My side felt wet. I kept moving. That's what medics do. You move. You don't think. I got 3 men clear before my knees buckled. The last thing I remember from that night was being hauled into a helicopter, someone yelling, "He's crashing," and the taste of blood mixing with sand on my tongue. When I woke up, I was in a field hospital 2 miles outside the city, and she was leaning over me. Margaret. Her hair tucked into a messy bun under a surgical cap. glasses slipping down her nose, a smear of dust on her cheekbone she hadn't noticed yet. She looked tired, but her eyes, God, her eyes, were steady, warm, like she'd been waiting for me. "You're lucky," she said softly. "Another inch, and that shrapnel would have gone right into your lung." I tried to speak. All I managed was a croak. She squeezed my wrist gently. "You're safe, Sam. You did your job. Let us do ours." She checked my vitals, cleaned my wound, murmured small reassurances I don't think she even realized she was saying. She stayed longer than her shift required, brought me water, adjusted my pillow, argued with a surgeon who wanted to rush my discharge. That night, before I was transferred, she handed me a small wooden box. No explanation, just a quiet, "Keep this close. It'll matter later." She smiled at me, tired, but real. The kind of smile you trust without needing to know why. That box, the same one sitting on my lap today, the same one Brent joked about, the same one that held every piece of the man I became after that night. I blinked, memory fading with the sound of someone adjusting a microphone at the front of the hall. My chest tightened, not from pain, but from knowing Margaret saved my life twice. Once on a battlefield, and once in this world by choosing to love me at all. The slideshow had already started by the time I came back fully. Soft music, faded photographs, little slices of Margaret's life drifting across the projector screen. Her childhood pictures, her old nursing badges, our wedding photo where my hair was still thick and black. People whispered gentle things as each image came up. Look how happy she was. She always smiled with her whole face. Remember that trip? She laughed the entire day. It should have comforted me. It almost did. But then I heard him again. I didn't have to look to know it was Brent. His voice carried a certain pitch, half boredom, half smugness. Even his whispers seemed to vibrate with arrogance. He leaned toward our cousin Daniel, pretending to speak discreetly. "I swear he exaggerates every story. Dude probably never even saw combat. You know how old guys are. They love making stuff up." Daniel stiffened but said nothing. His eyes flicked toward me just long enough to show he'd heard it. Others nearby did too. Little glances, uncomfortable shifting, the kind of silence people hide behind when they don't want to get involved. Brent chuckled under his breath. "All that medic talk? Probably just patching up paper cuts in Texas." His friends snickered. At Margaret's memorial, with her photo, her beautiful, kind face, glowing across the screen behind me. I didn't turn around, didn't correct him, didn't even grip the armrest tighter. I just kept my eyes on the slideshow, letting each picture land like a soft touch to the chest. Margaret in her early 20s, smiling behind a hospital desk. Margaret holding her first rose from our garden. Margaret kissing my cheek the day I came home from deployment. 100 tiny proofs of the life we built. 100 reasons why today was supposed to be about her, not about whether my war stories met Brent's criteria for real combat. The anger never came. Not the heat, not the tight jaw, none of it. What came instead was something colder, sharper, quieter, like a still pond right before something breaks the surface. Because it wasn't about me anymore. Not really. It was about the fact that even today, even on her day, this boy couldn't muster the decency to keep his mouth shut. Margaret would have forgiven him. She always believed in soft words and second chances, but she also believed in truth. And if she were here, she wouldn't want me to sit in the corner while someone spat on the very thing that shaped our life, the reason we met, the reason I lived long enough to love her at all. So I sat there, hands folded over the wooden box, letting the cold clarity settle deep in my bones. Not rage, not bitterness, just certainty. Today was the day Brent learned something he should have learned a long time ago, and I wasn't going to teach it with yelling, but with precision. I waited until the slideshow faded into a soft blank screen and the murmurs rose again. People shifted, stretched their legs, headed toward the tables lined with coffee urns and little paper cups. A memorial always has that strange lull, half grief, half small talk. That's when I stood up. Not abruptly, not making any noise, just rose to my feet like a man stretching old joints. Wooden box tucked under my arm as naturally as a folded coat. No one noticed me at first. Good. I didn't want an audience. I slipped out through the side door near the hymn books and stepped into the small hallway connecting the hall to the pastor's office. It was quiet there. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the faint smell of old carpet and lemon cleaner, a place that didn't ask questions. I leaned against the wall and finally set the wooden box in my hands. Its weight had changed over the years, or maybe I had. When Margaret first gave it to me, it felt like a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't just a medic who'd watched too many boys bleed out. But after decades of keeping it safe, after a marriage built on the foundation of that one brutal night in Ramadi, it had become something else. A promise, a truth, a piece of us both. I opened the lid slowly, feeling the familiar resistance of its old brass hinge. Inside, arranged with Margaret's careful hands, were three things: my combat medic badge, worn metal, tarnished along the edges, proof of a job done in the worst places. A folded field dressing, the same one they cut off me in the field hospital. Margaret saved it, said the stain wasn't blood, but evidence, and a small handwritten note. Her handwriting was neat, even when she was tired. I unfolded it with my thumb. Whatever you survived with honor. Don't ever let anyone shrink your life. Something tightened in my chest. Not pain, not grief. Purpose. Brent thought my service was a joke. Maybe he genuinely believed it. Maybe he just liked hearing his friends laugh. Maybe his world had never been dark enough to understand the parts of mine he mocked. But Margaret knew. She carried that truth with me every step of our life together, and she trusted me to guard it. I closed the box gently, holding it with both hands now. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to embarrass him. I wanted one thing, for Margaret's memory to be honored with truth, not silence. I straightened my back, breathed in deep, and walked back toward the hall. I knew exactly what I needed to do, not with anger, with precision, clean, quiet, deliberate, the way Margaret would have wanted. When I stepped back into the hall, people were settling again. Someone adjusted the projector cables. Someone else passed around a tray of cookies no one really wanted. Brent was at the back now, leaning against a wall, scrolling his phone like he'd already forgotten where he was. I didn't look at him, not yet. Instead, I made my way to the front where Pastor Nolan stood by the podium, sorting through his note cards with that quiet focus people use when grief sits too close. He glanced up when he saw me approaching. His face softened. "Sam," he whispered, placing a hand on my shoulder. "How are you holding up?" "As well as I can." My voice surprised me. It was steadier than I felt. He nodded, waiting. Pastors have a talent for silence. They let you speak when you're ready. I need a moment at the end, I finally said. His brows lifted slightly. Of course. To say something about Margaret? Yes, about her, about what she meant. He placed the note cards down, giving me his full attention. Take all the time you need. I shook my head. Not long. I'll keep it brief. Sam, he said gently, you don't owe anyone brevity today. He meant it with kindness, but brevity was exactly what I needed, because what I had to say wasn't a speech. It wasn't a story. It wasn't even a lesson. It was truth, simple, sharp, and impossible to misunderstand. Pastor Nolan patted my arm. Margaret always said you were a man of few words, but the right ones. That tightened something inside me. She believed that respect had to be earned, not demanded, and she believed it should be taught with kindness. She was a remarkable woman, he replied. She was, and today I'd like to honor that. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry. He just nodded and moved toward the microphone to announce the next hymn, trusting me the same way Margaret always had. I stepped back, holding the wooden box carefully against my ribs. My pulse was steady, my breathing even. Not anger, not revenge, just a man preparing to protect the memory of the woman he loved with the same quiet precision she used to save his life. When the hymn ended, Pastor Nolan cleared his throat softly and stepped to the podium. His voice carried with that warm steadiness he was known for. Before we conclude, he said, Margaret's husband, Sam, would like to share a few words. A ripple moved through the room, people straightening in their seats, a few dabbing at their eyes. Brent looked up from his phone with a bored expression, then smirked like he already knew what to expect. I stood slowly, wooden box held carefully in both hands. Each step toward the podium felt deliberate, grounded, the way I used to move through dark hallways overseas. Focused, controlled, nothing wasted. When I reached the stand, I didn't grip it like a lifeline or shuffle with nerves. I simply set the box down in front of me, folding my hands over it. I looked at the room, at Margaret's choir friends, at my sister twisting her tissues, at neighbors from our old street, at Brent standing with his arms crossed, pretending he wasn't watching. I took one quiet breath, then another. Thank you all for being here, I said. Margaret meant more to me than I'll ever be able to explain. She was kindness in its purest form. She could calm a room without saying a word, and she saved more lives than most soldiers ever will. A few nods, a few sniffles. She loved gardening. She loved that old bookstore on Maple Street. She laughed at corny jokes and cried at every baby commercial, and she prayed for people even when they didn't know she was praying for them. I paused, swallowing. My voice stayed steady. I miss her. I'll always miss her. I could have said 100 more things. Stories from our first date, how she fell asleep in movie theaters, the way she hummed when she cooked. But this wasn't a eulogy. It was something else, something heavier. I rested my fingertips on the lid of the wooden box. I want to say something for her now, not for me. The room quieted even more. Even Brent straightened a little. This isn't about service. It's not about medals or stories or what a man did 30 years ago in a place most people would rather not think about. My eyes found Brent's. Not harsh, not sharp, just steady. but someone here has turned the story of my life into a joke." A few heads turned toward him. A couple of people stiffened. I didn't raise my voice, didn't let it shake either. "This is Margaret's day, and she always believed in being honest, especially when someone needed to hear it. So, Brent?" His smirk faltered, just a hair. "Come up here a moment." The room shifted, tiny gasps, a cousin whispering, "Someone putting down their cup too fast." Brent glanced around as if expecting someone to laugh or rescue him. When they didn't, he pushed off the wall and walked forward, trying hard to look unbothered. His hands were in his pockets, his chin lifted, classic bravado. When he reached the podium, he muttered, "Yeah, what's up?" trying to sound casual, but the wobble in his voice gave him away. I didn't shame him. I didn't scold. I just opened the wooden box gently, letting the hinge creak in the quiet room. "This isn't about me," I said again, "but it's time you understood something." I turned the box toward him. The contents gleamed under the church lights, and Brent's face changed. Confusion first, then curiosity, then something else, something that made the room hold its breath. I didn't speak yet, not until he was ready, because this moment wasn't about spectacle. It was about truth finally coming home. Brent stared at the open box like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to touch it. His bravado drained so quickly it was almost visible. Shoulders sinking, mouth parting just slightly, eyes flicking from the badge to the faded field dressing to the folded note. I didn't rush him. I just held the box steady. "Go on," I murmured. "Pick it up." For a moment he didn't move. His friends shifted uncomfortably in the back rows, suddenly fascinated by the floor. My sister brought her hand to her mouth. The entire hall felt like it had stopped breathing. Finally, Brent swallowed and reached in with trembling fingers. He lifted the combat medic badge first. Its metal was worn, the edges dulled by time, but it still caught the light with a stubborn kind of dignity. Brent turned it over in his palm, staring at it as if seeing it for the first time. He didn't speak. Next, he lifted the field dressing. The fabric was stiff in places, the faint brown stain still visible after all these years. You could hear the tiny intake of breath from a few people who'd lived long enough to know what that color really meant. Brent's brows furrowed. He blinked, once, twice, like he was trying to understand why a man would keep something like this. Then he reached for the last item, the folded note in Margaret's handwriting. He hesitated, looked at me. "You can read it," I said quietly. His throat worked. He unfolded it slowly, the paper crackling slightly in the quiet. He read aloud, voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever you survived with honor. Don't ever let anyone shrink your life." His voice cracked on the last word. The hall stayed silent. No whispers, no shifting, no pitying looks. Just silence heavy enough to make even the walls feel closer. I stepped forward, not looming, not pressing, just close enough for him to hear me clearly. "That night in Ramadi," I said, "the IED hit our lead truck. We lost 3 men before we even hit the ground. I dragged out the ones I could reach. I patched what I could, and when I finally went down myself, it was your Aunt Margaret who kept me alive." Brent looked up sharply. "You, she was the nurse who treated me. She sat with me when I couldn't speak. She cleaned the shrapnel wound on my side. She saved my life long before she ever knew she would be part of it." A few people wiped their eyes. Someone sniffled in the far row. I kept my voice even, soft, measured. She gave me that box before I left the hospital, told me to hold on to it, said it mattered, said it was proof that even in the middle of the worst moments of my life, something worth living for could start. Brent looked down at the items again, badge in one hand, field dressing in the other, note trembling between his fingers. I went on. For years, your aunt kept these safe. She'd polish the box every spring. She'd say, "Sam never brags about what he's been through, so someone in this house should be the keeper of truth." His eyes glossed over. I didn't let him look away. "You weren't just mocking my service, Brent. You were mocking the reason I met the woman we're all here to honor. You were mocking the night she fought to keep me in this world." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Not one. I took the note gently and placed it back inside the box. Then I took the badge from his hand, slow and respectful, and set it atop the field dressing. My voice stayed low, steady as a heartbeat. "I'm not angry at you, but today Margaret deserved better, and so did the men who died while I held this badge." Brent stood frozen, and the room, every person who'd ever wondered, doubted, or stayed silent, absorbed the truth like a sudden shift in gravity. No lecture, no shouting, just a single, unbreakable moment. One he'd remember for the rest of his life. Brent didn't move at first. He just stood there beside me, hands hanging uselessly at his sides, his eyes fixed on the wooden box like it might open again and reveal a different truth. A softer one that didn't make him feel so small, but this was the only truth there was. When I closed the lid and slid the box back toward me, he stepped back like he'd been dismissed, not rudely, not offended, just hollow, like something had quietly caved in behind his ribs. He walked away without a word, not to his friends, not to his mother, not even to the bathroom. He went straight to the very last row of chairs, sat down, elbows on his knees, and stared at the floor. His hands were clasped so tight his knuckles were white. No theatrics, no dramatic exit. Just silence. People noticed. Not because he made a scene, he didn't, but because the absence of his usual swagger was louder than anything else in the room. My sister approached me first. She looked pale, eyes glossy, lips trembling the way they did when she had too many things to apologize for. "Sam, she whispered. "You don't owe me anything," I said gently. She pressed her lips together and nodded, but tears still spilled over. "I had no idea he was saying things like that. I really didn't." "I know. I'm so sorry." There was nothing more to say. Her apology wasn't for me, it was for Margaret, and I accepted it. One of Margaret's choir friends stepped forward next, touching my arm lightly. "Thank you for sharing that part of her life. I had no idea she was so brave." "She'd say she was just doing her job," I replied. A few others came, old neighbors, co-workers of hers, even Daniel, who looked like he wanted to sink into the floor from second-hand guilt. "I didn't know how to stop him," Daniel murmured. "I should have said something." "Most people don't speak up. That's not a flaw, it's just human." He swallowed hard and nodded. Through all of this, I kept my eyes from drifting toward Brent, but I felt his presence, felt the weight of his silence like a small, dense storm cloud at the back of the hall. But there was no triumph in me, no satisfaction, no victory, just quiet. I didn't embarrass him, I didn't humiliate him, I didn't demand repentance. I simply honored Margaret with the truth. And in doing so, something inside me settled, something that had been restless ever since Brent's first joke. The memorial slowly wound down after that. People collected their coats, hugged one another, whispered goodbyes. The slideshow screen went dark. The scent of fading flowers filled the air. When the hall finally emptied, I stood alone for a moment, my hand resting on the wooden box, not proud, not angry, not vindicated, just certain that Margaret would have approved. I walked out into the cool evening, grateful for the quiet. Because for the first time all day, the silence felt gentle again. I woke up early the next morning, the way I always did when Margaret was alive. Habit, I suppose. The house felt different without her. Same walls, same creaking floors, same smell of old coffee grounds and laundry detergent, but quieter in a way that wasn't empty so much as settled. I brewed a pot of coffee, the old drip machine sputtering like it always did. Margaret used to scold me for never replacing it. "Sentiment doesn't filter grounds, Sam," she'd say, swatting my arm with a dish towel. I'd pretend not to hear her, secretly hoping it would last just one more year. I poured myself a cup and sat in the spot she liked best, the small patio behind the house where the morning sun hit the potted herbs she nurtured every spring. Basil, rosemary, thyme. It smelled like her hands. The wooden box sat beside my cup. I hadn't opened it since yesterday. I didn't need to. I'd memorized every detail a long time ago. Around 8, I grabbed a fresh bouquet from the kitchen counter, daffodils, her favorite, and drove to the cemetery. The air was cool, the sky a soft blue that looked freshly washed. When I reached her headstone, I crouched down and brushed away a few stray leaves. "Morning, Maggie," I murmured, placing the flowers neatly at the base. I set the wooden box beside them for a moment, not to give it away, just to let her hold it again in whatever way the world allows. I stayed there in silence, letting the peace settle around me. It wasn't sorrowful, it wasn't heavy, it was grateful. A steady kind of ache that comes from loving someone fully and losing them gently. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn right away, but when I did, I saw Brent standing there, hands shoved in the pockets of a hoodie, hair messy, eyes red, not from theatrics or guilt, but from a night that had clearly bruised him from the inside. He held 2 cups of coffee. He approached slowly, like I might tell him to leave. "Morning, Uncle Sam," he said quietly. "I, brought you one." He offered the cup without looking me in the eye. I took it, not out of politeness, because the gesture was real. He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't know." I nodded. "I know you didn't. I didn't mean to make fun of her. Or you. I know. But some things matter more than we realize, and some people deserve better, even when they're not here to hear it." He blinked fast. "I get that now." I believed him. I didn't scold him, didn't rub salt into a wound he'd finally started to feel. Instead, I placed a hand on his shoulder, firm, steady. "Respect isn't owed to me, Brent. It's owed to the people buried under markers with no names." He nodded, jaw tight. We stood there a while longer, side by side, saying nothing. And for the first time since Margaret passed, the silence felt exactly right. I drove home slowly, letting the morning settle around me like a blanket that wasn't warm but familiar. When I walked back into the house, I set my keys in the little ceramic bowl Margaret made in a pottery class decades ago, crooked, chipped, perfect. The wooden box came with me to the living room. I placed it back on the shelf where Margaret always kept it, angled just slightly forward the way she used to adjust it after dusting. The note faced outward, her handwriting, her truth. I didn't need to open it anymore. The weight of it, literal and otherwise, had done its job. The house didn't feel lighter exactly. Grief doesn't evaporate, it just shifts. But there was a steadiness now, a sense that something had been put back where it belonged. Not through anger, not through punishment, through truth. Margaret would have approved of how I handled yesterday. Quiet, measured, without cruelty, just clarity. And Brent had his moment. Not the kind meant to break a person, but the kind that makes them think, really think. We all need one of those in our lives, sooner or later. By afternoon, the sun had slipped behind some clouds, softening the light in the living room. I sat down in my old armchair, hands folded loosely, listening to the small sounds of the house settling. The same house where Margaret laughed, cooked, sang, scolded, and loved, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for whatever came next. Would you have handed Brent the box in front of everyone? And do you think a quiet truth can change someone more than any argument ever could? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one. If this story moved you, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a new upload. And if you know someone who'd appreciate a story about dignity and quiet justice, share this video with them. Your end screen videos should be appearing right about now. Go watch one of those next. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with a brand new story.